Josh Allen's choice, Ken Dorsey, gets the Bills job. So what does that mean for the quarterback and the Bills offense next season? Plus, Brian Daboll left that job. But what was his relationship with Sean McDermott like? And did it impact the team? And speaking of Daboll and Joe Shane, they're right in the middle of the Brian Flores lawsuit that should and will impact the league. All that's coming up on this week's edition of the Buffalo Plus Podcast.
All right, welcome back to the Buffalo Plus Podcast presented by Connors and Ferris, Mike Catalana, Dan Fates. I am Jenna Cottrell. A lot to talk about in the NFL. We'll start specifically with the Bills news in terms of Ken Dorsey being named offensive coordinator. He was formerly the passing coordinator, quarterback coach, worked directly with Josh Allen throughout the last couple of seasons. Mike, this decision, were you surprised that he was named OC?
No, not surprised. I mean, Sean McDermott has said, they like to, bring guys up from within. He's been with the team 3 years. He's a guy that has experience, maybe not at this level yet. I don't know. We don't really know what the dynamics were between Dorsey, Daboll, the Giants, the Bills, what was being offered. But he does have, as Dan knows, he's got a pretty good relationship with the quarterback, and I think that's where things start.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the end of the year press conference that we had with Josh. Look, it was right after a heartbreaking loss in Kansas City, but we knew we weren't going to be able to talk to him for quite some time. Actually, he's skipping the Pro Bowl this week to golf. Same. I'm foregoing the Pro Bowl as well. I got to ask because Mac Jones took my spot as quarterback. But I thought it was very telling words, and I want to insert what Josh Allen had to say here when asked about what he thought about Ken Dorsey becoming the next offensive coordinator for the Bills.
I mean, I think when he got here 3 years ago, I think my career definitely changed in terms of how I viewed the game of football. Just having a guy in the quarterback room that played the game, is the winningest college quarterback of all time, 38-2. Will never let me forget that. He says it all the time. But just the way that he approaches the game, he's competitive. He's smart, he works his ass off, and I appreciate what he's done for me over the course of my career so far. And
look, guys, I thought that was very telling. Like, we know that Josh is pretty scripted, doesn't usually say a whole lot, but he had said that he was a huge advocate before when he was asked about, do you want to have a say in the offensive coordinator? And he's like, well, there's a guy in the building I'm a huge advocate for. Like, yeah, that was kind of, I don't know, not rocking the boat, but he was kind of calling his shot. You know what I'm saying, Mike?
Yeah, and look, McDermott did say that basically, I think Bean said it too, like decisions weren't going to be made without bringing in Josh. Now, that doesn't mean Josh says, right, I got to have this guy. I mean, he's not Aaron Rodgers here. Like, he's
correct.
He's Josh Allen. But look, it's a guy they certainly like, and it's a guy who certainly might have had opportunities other places. We know he would have with the Giants. So, Jenna, it makes sense now.
Yeah.
The other part of that is it's a step up for him. Is he ready for that? Well, he certainly seems like it. But this is the part I always go back and forth on. There's play calling. I'm assuming Dorsey was involved in some ways with Daboll. They have a very good relationship. Daboll was calling the plays. But, other coaches have input. And, I'm sure Dorsey did. And he learned from Daboll, who's been calling plays for a long time. So, is he ready for it? I will tell you this, Jenna. It's nice to be able to call plays for Josh Allen.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, that's a good start.
That's the thing where it's like, who you have at quarterback and the capabilities there, what the ceiling is or how far up the ceiling is. But also it's interesting because I feel like with that comes the kind of double-edged sword of if Josh were to take a step back, how much blame, Dan, do you think would be put on Ken Dorsey and the new offense?
All of it. I think that I was surprised. I'll say this. I know Bills fans thought it was a no-brainer. I know they were saying this last year when Daboll was getting interviewed. We thought he may go to the Chargers. A lot of people going, Ken Dorsey slides right in. I will say he wouldn't have been my first choice. And I only say that is to Mike's point, is that he's never called plays before. He may have had a say in it, but the buck stopped with Brian Daboll. He got the blame and pretty much none of the credit when Josh did well. And again, we can go back. This is the Brian Daboll podcast, him and his fat face on FaceTime, all of those things. But and I know people are going, Dan doesn't know what he's talking about. Like Dorsey's great, all these things. Yes. And I'll get to the pro in a second, but I think in Daboll's shoes or in Dorsey's shoes, this is kind of a lose-lose situation. And I mean that in the sense of Josh regresses. The offense is maybe now 10th in points per game and things like that. Dorsey will get blamed. If Josh excels and wins an MVP, he ain't going to get the credit. Like Dorsey's not going to get the credit because Josh has already taken a step up. Like he's already an MVP candidate. So like if Josh does well, Dorsey's not going to get the credit. If the offense does well, it's Allen. If the offense does bad, it's Dorsey's fault. So I think it's a tough spot to be in compared to where if he were to go to the Giants, Jenna, he could be rebuilding Daniel Jones. He's there with a guy that he was with. Like I'm just looking at it where we always kind of talk about like what your career trajectory is. I don't know his relationship that he has with Sean McDermott. I'm not sure about that. None of us do. We're giving our opinions, but he seemed to have a pretty good relationship with Daboll. If he wanted to go to the Giants, I'm sure he could have, as according to multiple reports that they wanted him. I just think it's a tough spot. I'm afraid you don't want to be the whipping boy kind of thing.
I can understand why it would be a tough spot when you say it like that because of how spectacular Allen has been. And if there is a slight thing of regression, dip of regression, I also do feel like at the same point, it's so hard to have a solid offense when you don't have the quarterback. Right? Like when you have Daniel Jones, I mean, we talk about it's not the X's and O's, it's the Jimmies and Joes. Like I know that's a really old football cliche, but I feel like it would be easier to have an explosive offensive scheme if you have a guy that you know is the guy at quarterback.
Yeah. Yes, it is. And Dan's right. But it is sort of simplistic. It's like, if it's better, who gets the credit and all that's from the outside. From the inside, I don't know if that's the case. Like this year, the offense was sort of, I mean, obviously it was still very successful, but it wasn't the 2020 offense, which was more consistently dominant. It was different. It had its struggles up and down. And then at the end, they were spectacular in the 2 playoff games. So you can go back and forth on that part of it. But I will say that Daniel Jones it's an interesting scenario if he was to go to the Giants because we don't know how long Daniel Jones is going to be the quarterback.
Yeah, that's true.
This could be the year with Daboll. And then, by the way, this is the other part. The thought was, well, maybe Daboll turns the play calling over to him. I guess. We're sort of past this part anyhow. He got hired by the Bills. But if I'm the Giants and I'm hiring Brian Daboll, I want Brian Daboll calling the plays.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't mean that Dorsey wouldn't have had a role. And it's just like I say with Andy Reid has done with all his guys, and they're all part of the process. And several of them have gotten head coaching jobs. I'm saying is it's different in that case. So you said, what's his relationship with Sean McDermott? Well, it must be pretty good because Sean had huge input on who was going to be the OC in this.
100%. And I think it was a part of it. And like I said, Dorsey, what I like about Ken Dorsey is the fact that he has played quarterback at a high level. And I think that's something, and that's what, Josh kind of said, like he helped me change the way I looked at the game. Dorsey played at the highest level in college. He had an NFL career. Like who is anybody to knock Dan Orlovsky or any of these guys for like, they were a bad NFL quarterback. They were still an NFL quarterback. Ken Dorsey was still played in the NFL. He's better. And I think that relationship is important. I think it is important to have somebody that Josh trusts and can help weather highs and lows, because I think that was one of the greatest things that Daboll did was the relationship that he built with so many players. Like that's not my opinion. Players have said that to us, what he's meant to them. So I think that's part of it. I think that's the pro. I really do like that Ken Dorsey has played quarterback, all-time winningest quarterback in college football, at the time. And so that's something that I like. My concern is that, like I said, I think play calling in the NFL is ridiculously hard. I just think it's constantly criticized. Apparently there's a lot of NFL offensive coordinators that watch games on Sundays from their couch because they know way better than the guys that are doing it. So I guess I do have a little bit of skepticism handing the keys to the car of
said the Ferrari
that is right. The Bills offense. As I've said, I think the Bills offensive coordinator job was the most sought after coordinator job in football right now. I just don't see where you have Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen and an up and coming offense and Gabe Davis and all of these pieces that you could. that you couldn't have anybody you wanted, and you're giving it to a guy that you know, which is nice, but again, has never called plays on 3rd and 12 in a big spot.
Yeah. I mean, I think that criticism is fair. Obviously, they believe that he has what it takes, and they've seen him grow over the years. I think he joined the Bills in 2019, was it? Somewhere around there. So he's been with the team for a little bit. Yeah. I'm just curious what his offensive philosophy is. Like, I know we kind of say that tongue in cheek, but obviously he was a passing game coordinator, so he had a hand in that. But is he as adamant about the passing game? Where does he fall on the run game? Where does he fall on what that will look like? I think that's something that we really don't know yet. Obviously, that'll come out throughout the season, but I think that part of it is kind of interesting because.
Well, how about if Jenna? How about if I do this? I go DABOLL, I'll get my face right up into the screen and say, we're going to call whatever we think is best to work. Like, how many times did we hear him say that to us? Yeah. And it's right, but it is an interesting thought. Because I know we're going to talk about this because we kind of got a feeling of what Sean McDermott wanted from the offense. Mm-hmm. And it put them in an interesting spot this year. Yeah. And when you are bringing that guy in as your coordinator, there absolutely are conversations about what you want to do and how it works with what Sean's trying to do, which, Dan, close your ears for a second, which includes running and more of a physical brand of football.
Yeah, I agree. That is something that, Brian Flores, a former Miami Dolphins coach, suing the NFL, a couple teams as well, the Giants included in that, a huge lawsuit about racial discrimination and kind of the practices of the NFL. But mentioned in the court documents was the fact that there was this preconceived notion that maybe Brian Daboll was unhappy in Buffalo and things kind of had taken a turn with Sean McDermott. I know I saw a couple of Buffalo, Western New York area articles written about that. And Dan, it was interesting because I was talking about this with Mike actually last night when we recorded this or when we were talking. And I was like, oh, wow. And then Mike was like, well, we kind of knew all along, we knew this last season that was stressful. And it's like, Dan, I guess we did.
Yeah, I think we knew that. Like I said, it was after the Patriots loss, Mike, on Monday night that was asked, are you and Brian on the same page? And Sean kind of skirted the answer. Didn't really give a ringing endorsement to Daboll. And then I remember
didn't mention Daboll.
Yeah. And then I remember I asked him on a Zoom, maybe after the next win, was like, how was Brian Daboll? How was Brian Daboll saying? He's like, oh, he was phenomenal. I thought he did a great job. Again, and Mike, you and I have talked about this, and I don't know how much we've talked about it on here. How do we say this? The credit for turning this team around, I think we've talked about, Mike, whether it's on our plane rides or our trips and stuff like that. The offense became what the Bills are known for, and Josh Allen and all of these things. And last season, especially when they had their great, run and won the division title and all of these things. And it was like, man, Brian Daboll and Josh Allen, that was it. And you always said, did Sean get annoyed that Brian Daboll's getting this credit or no, maybe not credit, notoriety? Maybe he's getting the one that's getting talked about more as, hey, Bills offense. Yeah. Sean's not an offensive guy. He'll be the first one to say that.
It's inherent in being a defensive coach when you have a dominant quarterback. And look, I don't think Sean McDermott, he has an ego. All coaches have an ego, right? And some of it plays itself out more. Brian Billick thought he was an offensive guy, and he won a Super Bowl with Trent Dilfer, a horrendous offense that went 6 games without a touchdown, and he won it with Ray Lewis in a defense. But he won the Super Bowl, right? Yep. So he did. Yeah. So there's a point about winning. But I'm not saying consciously I don't want to give Daboll credit. And I don't want this. No.
Yeah, I don't want that.
The team became Josh Allen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just think that sometimes it could probably wear on a head coach who's elevated himself to this spot. And especially when the defense maybe wasn't playing as well. But to his credit, Sean defers. And it's funny, even with Leslie, I asked him the question about the defense. And this was when the defense came off an awesome game. And he's like, it's Leslie Frazier's defense. It is his defense. Yeah. So he's saying that coming off the great game. He didn't say a word about Leslie when he came off the bad game in the playoffs when they fell apart at the end. Meaning okay, Like he did give Leslie all the credit when they were the number one defense, and he sort of took a step back. I just think also you guys, Sean and Brian Daboll, are different personalities, strong personalities.
Yeah.
And I think there's a natural tendency. It's like in a band. I mean, Lennon and McCartney, for God's sakes, right? I mean, these are two geniuses. And then after a while, it just they annoy each other. I think some of that happened? Yeah. And Daboll wanted a head coaching job, thought he had it last year and didn't get it.
Yeah.
Now, to Jenna mention that lawsuit, let's be honest. That's almost like a little bit of a game of telephone, right? Isn't that game it's called, telephone, when you say something to somebody? I mean, it's like, oh, yeah, I heard he might be wanting out. Well, that doesn't mean Daboll is for sure leaving. He's slamming the door on Buffalo.
Correct.
And he's going to go. And, it was like, hey, Brian, maybe Brian Daboll would be a good coordinator if you were looking for somebody, if he got that job. But I wasn't surprised at all that there's tension there. And they were a good working team, but Daboll needed his own gig, and he got it.
It's funny because it wasn't. I feel like there was obviously a disconnect throughout the season, but it wasn't until seeing that report where like there was disconnect. Where like, oh my God, I can't believe it. Just because the way everything ended the season, the way the offense took the turn, all that stuff, you kind of made you forget about, in the middle of the season where it was that sense of like, are these guys even on the same page? I mean, we had a whole podcast talking about it, but it took remembering that to be like, oh yeah, no, that makes total sense.
Well, and I find it like Mike said, it's like a game of telephone. Like this wasn't like a real report. Like, yes, it's a lawsuit. Like I'm not trying to downplay that at all, but it was a text message. Like, hey, Brian and Sean aren't getting along. Yeah, that day they may not have been getting along. Like, I would hate to see what you guys text about me.
Text I send.
I was gonna say the text that you guys send about me about like Dan's doing this again today.
Dan, it's only when you and I do that about Jenna. It's never about you,
Mike. I was just trying to be polite.
Oh, okay.
Like to sit here, like those guys spend so many hours together. The fact that they don't fight, like,
that's unrealistic.
Yeah, and again, but then the question is, did it impact the offense? And that's what we asked at the beginning.
Yeah.
I think for a while, and some of it, I bring Brandon Beane in on this. Because that offensive line did not seem to be built to be a more physical line. And it took a little while for them maybe to get the right combination, plus maybe to get Spencer Brown back in there full time.
Yeah.
And then, some of the other moves they made on the line, and Singletary playing better, more confidence in the run game. I mean, these things it isn't just like call more run plays and it's going to work. It was a combination of things. And to be honest, we said Josh was incredible, especially obviously the playoff games.
Yeah.
But the offense had become a little more well-rounded. And with that, Allen's talent just takes over.
Yeah.
It wasn't like that, like we said, it wasn't like they were a running game. And I think as a team, they became more physical because of that. So it got to the point where I think it should be, which is good at it, efficient at it.
Yeah.
But I think it took Daboll a little while to get there because Dan's mentioned it before. I got you 500 points last year. Now you want to change things up?
I see both sides of the coin of like Daboll being like, this is Josh Allen. We're going to have him throw the ball. We saw how effective it was last year. And McDermott also being like, well, to keep the passing game honest, we need to have some runs and have the defense not just pin their ears. You know what I mean? Like the way you talk about it. But yeah, I mean, they are just very different people too.
Yep.
Yeah. And this can kind of go backwards and then segue into, Daboll with the Giants. But I think it is important. And, again, this is just from me hearing other smart people talk about it. But Trent Dilfer always talks about that the relationship between an offensive the play caller and the quarterback is like a marriage. Like you need to be, when it's good, it's good. When it's not, it's not. And you need to be finishing each other's sentences is pretty much what what Dilfer says. And that when he had really good seasons and he could really kind of click, he knew what the play was going to be called before the play was in his ear. And that's something that Daboll and Josh really had. And this isn't like a divorce. Like I was trying to figure out like how to explain it. Like, it's not like Daboll's dead, but like, it's almost like I want him to go on and find somebody, a new team. And I wish him the best. And, you know, and then
it's an amicable breakup, and those do exist.
Wait a minute. What is it? What did the guy
Haley
from
say?
Coldplay, what did they do?
Oh.
They did a
No, I don't know. You say Haley.
with what's her name?
Haley talks about relationships on that whole
No,
podcast.
but they did a something uncoupling, whatever uncoupling.
Oh, an uncoupling. I think that was the phrase they used.
Yeah.
And it's weird because like it's not like Dorsey's like the new girlfriend. Like he's been around. Like he's they're like, yeah, like this.
Look,
this
is the evolution. This is what it is. It's like, you know, they all expected Daboll. He needed to get a head coaching job. It was time for him. It's like your kid's moving out of the house. Like, it's time. It's time. You know, it's time for them to move out.
Damn,
and so that's good, right? And then and he's going to the Giants. Now, it would have really been something if he'd have gone to Miami, but that's a whole nother thing, because the Miami and the Giants thing is how we got where we are right now.
Yeah. Brian Flores, that lawsuit, what it says about the NFL, like the claims that it has, obviously, I think this is going to be something that's going to be talked about for a long time as things kind of continue to unfold. Mike, what do you make of that and what it means now for the league, or what do you think of the implications and the impact? Fascinating
way it was done. If you read that lawsuit, it's not written in total legalese, man. They start out with the Belichick text messages. By the way, I checked. I have 12 Bryans in my contacts. So it can happen, and I bet you it's happened to you guys too.
Snap face. We know that Belichick's not great at this snap face.
I know, but you think about it. So that happens. Look, I don't know if every specific thing Brian Flores is saying is actually true, or maybe it's the way he perceived it. Like, we don't know really what the Giants were thinking. I know we're going to go more into that, but to not think that the NFL doesn't have a problem with this is comical. Mike Tomlin's the only black coach in the league.
Pathetic.
It's silly. Has there been progress? A little at times. I mean, I think if I counted right, there's 7 black GMs now, which is progress. Those are decision makers, not always the guy that hired the coach, right?
Correct.
Because the GM sometimes hires the coach, and that leads that. Sometimes he doesn't, but it's usually the owner. But come on, the NFL, and I don't know what I would say this. The Dolphins owner sounds like a whack job to begin with. With all the other stuff going on.
That's an understatement.
Is it all accurate? And then he fires the guy. I mean, he did have an up and down tenure. He somehow ended up close to 500. I mean, even in this season, with what did he win? Lose 8 in a row and then win 8 in a row?
Yeah.
Is that what it was?
Lost 7, win 7, something like that. Yeah.
Crazy in itself. But Brian Flores looks like an NFL head coach to me. And then he gets fired. So I'm 100% with him that there's an issue in the NFL that should have been addressed. And this lawsuit, when you include Belichick, John Elway, and the Miami Dolphins, that's a pretty good way to get people's attention.
Yeah. Well, and correct me if I'm wrong. And like I said, I don't know all the intricacies of these things. As we like to say, you know, Rex Ryan famously said, I'm not a doctor. Like, I don't know all these things. But like, part of, you know, what it seems like Flores is upset about, that he felt like his interview was a sham. And I think some of that, Mike, is part of the problem of the Rooney Rule. That like, right? I mean, I don't want to be getting over my skis here and talking about something I don't know anything about. But the fact of having to interview minority candidates when they may not be real candidates is kind of insulting. And
well, first of all, it should be insulting to Brian Flores if that's why he was brought in that way. Look, there's another component to this. You hire Joe Shane as your GM. He's worked with Brian Daboll.
Yeah,
he probably was very interested in an offensive coach. Now, that doesn't exclude, because there's black offensive coordinators and former head coaches who could coach your quarterbacks too. But he had the relationship. Again, this is where we get to the point where if there's more executives who maybe are in those places of influence, then when they get their jobs, maybe they look at things a little differently. But that being said, first of all, I'm not telling but if the Giants really were doing a scam interview just to get by the thing, you're really going to bring in Brian Flores for that?
Right.
A 3-year head coach with the Miami Dolphins, who just won 8 of his last 9 games, I would bring him in for a legitimate interview.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
I'm not
agree.
giving them reasons to work around the rule,
Look,
but
the Bills had to bring in 2 candidates for their offensive coordinator position. They interviewed the passing games coordinator from the Ravens and then the running backs coach from Green Bay.
Edgar Bennett. Yeah.
Yeah. So
But
like,
Jenna, part of this, but Dan mentioned the Rooney Rule, but the Rooney Rule was really brought into effect, and it's, think of the irony, it's the Rooneys, the Steelers, the only team now with a black head coach, but it was brought up because these coaches were not even getting the interviews. They weren't even getting brought in to get an opportunity. And the more interviews, usually a bench, hey, look, separate from Brian Flores, who is making a point that needs to be made, and I give him credit for doing that. Brian DABOLL is qualified to be a head coach in the league and has earned his spot. I feel badly in that case that he's sitting there going, really? Like last year, we all know DABOLL thought he had that Chargers job. So this idea that everybody knew he had the job, I thought for sure he was going to the Chargers, and then boom, Staley gets the job. So even what Belichick knew might have not been accurate. And DABOLL could have said, I'm going to Miami. Like we didn't know. If the Giants knew that, shame on them, and they should get called out for it. But DABOLL's qualified. So's Brian Flores. I'm not saying one's more than the other. Flores has head coaching job experience, but
well,
that's
so
what the Rooney Rule is about. It's got to be changed. It's got to be something different. And this isn't working that way.
Yeah,
I agree 100%.
No, I think it's definitely something that like it's interesting because of the NFL and the way it's structured, and to see like this rule happen and then Brian Flores kind of talk about it. I feel like it's a conversation that needs to be had as well as you look at things going forward. But it is just interesting that, you know, Brian Flores is only 40 years old.
Yeah.
Like that is, I mean, credit to him. Like, I think that's a huge decision to make when you want to call out, you know, the executives at B. I'm curious how, like, Dan, how do you think Goodell handles this? Obviously the NFL putting
I don't know, poorly. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like what, like
I'm
this
with
is
you.
like, this isn't going to like, Matt Perino, shout out to Matt Perino. He said, like, oh, this is disgusting if this is how the NFL handles it, with no comment, or that there's no merit to this. And I responded to his tweet by saying, I'm shocked the NFL mishandling an investigation. I've never heard of such a thing.
Yeah.
Like, every single chance the NFL can get to shoot themselves in the foot, they will do it. And whether it's one thing or another. And like I said, Colin Kaepernick did it his way. It seems like Brian Flores is going about it another way. He's making this public. He wants, and he even said, like, if he doesn't get another job in the NFL for something that he's earned the respect to do, you know, that is a big risk that I give him a lot of credit for saying what he believes is right and putting his neck and his job and his career on the line.
By the way, I wanted to ask you guys, because I do try not to use phrases that I'm really not sure I know what they are, but would you say he put the league on blast? Is that correct?
No cap. I don't know.
I mean,
Meaning, like, you're calling out John Elway.
People say that?
What's that?
On blast? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Mike's right, I think.
Yeah.
As 2 white guys can say on blast.
I'm saying is, you called out John Elway. You brought Bill Belichick's fumbling of text messages.
Yeah.
But it also shows that Belichick's, first of all, it is the Giants and Belichick. He has a great relationship with the Maras. So that's a guy who would have had some inside information
100%.
in all likelihood. That's how that stiff Joe Judge got a job. That should be, they should just put up a picture of Joe Judge and say, this clown got a head coaching job. There you go. So that should tell you something. I mean, guys that just get interviews all the time. So I am all for Flores doing this. The difference between this and Kaepernick was Kaepernick put his career on the line too. It was a social justice thing that needs to be said. It was not a football related thing. So the league could almost say, like, this isn't part of football. And they handled that poorly, as we know.
And then they
This is at the core of football. This is the guys coaching these players. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm looking around the league and I'm saying, it's comical, because let's face it, there's some bad coaches who get jobs. Look, I had nothing against Nate Hackett. He did a good job. Is that really a workaround to get, you know, to get Aaron Rodgers to go to Denver. Not that Nate Hackett might not do a good job, but like, really? Boom, head coach like that. Yeah. And whether Harbaugh, by the time this is out, does Harbaugh get a job just because he decides to come back? And at least he has experience in the NFL and took a team to a Super Bowl. But
to your point, Mike, there are qualified black head coaches, Leslie Frazier, Eric Bieniemy, guys that just Brian Flores, for again, and it seems like, you know, the other allegation in the article is, or the lawsuit is, Stephen Ross wanted to pay him $100,000 for every loss in the 2019 season. Now, if that's true and he can prove it, Stephen Ross should have to sell his team.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
And because not only for the fact that it's just bananas, but the fact also this league is going down a more and more slippery slope with legalized gambling. Mm-hmm. And if you have owners telling coaches to throw games, that is massive implication. The NBA has dealt with their own issues with refs shaving points and all of those things. This is not the time to have coaches, owners throwing games or incentivizing games. Would be a massive issue for the NFL.
And this is, I'm going to stick up for, the Sabres did it too. And the Sixers, the whole trust the process. They never put the players out on the court and said, go lose the game, told the coach to lose the game. They just put a lousy team on the court to lose games. There is a major difference between putting what was a poor team. I mean, I give Flores credit, man. He still found a way to win games.
It's even more of a credit to his coaching.
That he was able to do that. Now, look, we've heard some things that, you know, he's not the most collaborative guy in the room and all that kind of stuff. Hey, guys can grow too. He worked hard to get the job. I'm not even saying, even if he got fired, like you're talking about a guy with experience who can win games in this league, he should be. Plus, there's still openings for jobs. Mm-hmm. I don't think he's going to get them now, but the league needs to address this. But to your point right away, Dan, when you come out with a statement right away, nothing to see here, we're all fine. That's the NFL. Arrogance. It starts with the owners. Goodell covers for all of them. You wait till that Super Bowl news conference. He's gonna give more lawyerly, cliched answers. It'll be painful to listen to. That's what he's gonna do when he's up there.
Oh, I'm not shocked by that at all. I wonder if he's gonna do.
Hey, remember that time he sat in his basement in a chair and
he's just like one of us.
He ate peanut M&Ms. Like, what a cool guy.
It's so gross.
Now I will
wait till 15 years from now when he comes out and says, "Wow, we really mishandled that Brian Flores lawsuit." Like, that'll be fun.
Yeah, I will say this: the idea of ownership. Look, that is the most arrogant, exclusive club in the world. You know, 99.999% of the world couldn't be in that club.
Yeah. And
race is a factor. That's more of a global issue than it is specifically to black ownership, which is a limited thing it's limited, very small in the NBA. Like it's hard for any person to come up with it. But that group, I mean, that is a unique 32 there. They as a collective group, they don't care. They don't care what other people. It's sort of like, I have to say, like Augusta. Remember the year at Augusta when they were like, you got to do this, that, or the other, and the network said we're not do commercials. They're not going to have commercials for the Masters, and they're like, fine, we'll just do it with no commercials. Like that's the way the NFL operates. Like this is what we do, and then to deny it is silly. Why are you doing that? This league is just doing phenomenally well. Ratings are through the roof. Stop putting your head in the sand and look at what this guy is bringing to you as a problem, because it is a problem.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, I just don't know if they'll be aware enough to actually take a look at it. Like I feel like there's just no. It's just like kind of covering it up as opposed to being like, maybe there are things to change. But I feel like now at least is the time where this will be taken more seriously. Like I would like to hope and think that's the case. But maybe that's just me with like my rose-colored glasses on.
No, I think the transparency has got to become something. I mean, it is interesting now, Dan. It never used to be, but like where teams will like tweet out, we're interviewing this guy, we're bringing in this guy. Part of it, I will say, it's not an excuse, it's a reason, is the weird way you hire coaches. Season's going on, teams are in the playoffs. Who can be if they really wanted to fix it, you might be able to push everything back a little bit and put a moratorium on it, and it doesn't start until, I don't know, the week between the week right after the championship game. And the only coaches you're then worried about are the ones that are specifically in the Super Bowl. I don't know. Yeah. That might help because it is a weird. I know they've tried to work around. Look at what DABOLL and Leslie went through this year.
Yeah,
strange.
Second year in a row.
Yeah, strange. Trying to interview or get through it, the night after a game. So
I'd be so curious to hear what Leslie Frazier has to say. Yep. Like his perspective on everything. A guy who's been a head coach before. Obviously, that didn't work out. Being hired by the Bills, and just like he's seen a lot of NFL football, like what he makes of this whole situation. And he's done a lot of head coaching interviews. That's just something I don't know if he would. I'm sure this will be asked of him months.
He would
from
give
now.
a great answer. Like
he would give a phenomenal
every answer from Leslie is phenomenal.
Adult in the room. That's Leslie, right?
Yeah.
When the team needs stability, like that's the guy I would turn to.
Yeah. When they've had men, I think so much nowadays. The head coach is the closest guy to Sean McVay, or the guy that, had a cup of coffee with Kyle Shanahan. Yeah. Like it's things like that. And guess what? Sean McDermott, from everything that we've heard, and, Julian Edelman went on a Pardon My Take podcast and said, Sean McDermott is a leader of guys. He's a leader of men. Like, yes, he probably knows more about football. He's probably forgotten more about football than I'll ever know in my life. But he also knows, hey, I got Leslie here. He's good there. I got this. Brian Daboll can do this. Like that is just such a credit to what makes great head coaches, because look at Harbaugh with Baltimore, special teams coordinator. Like he doesn't know that much. He's not an expert in offense or defense, but he knows to say, hey, you take care of this.
Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin is not a coordinator. He's a leader. That guy's definitely a leader. For sure. That's what his role is. So, we'll see where it goes from here. But Jenna's right. I am hopeful that there isn't just some quick fix. They make a rule. You got to do this, because that just allows teams to work around it, which is sad. It should be more of eyes wide open candidates, and they're qualified people. Hire them. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. We'll have plenty more on the Buffalo Plus podcast coming up. We're also going to do some Bills superlatives next week for our episode. So we'll be brainstorming that from the Bills season. Mike Catalana and Dan Fates, I am Jenna Cottrell. Please be sure to like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe. We'll have plenty of off-season coverage as we continue this run of the Bills season being over, but still plenty to talk about in the NFL. Thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you next time here on Buffalo Plus.